This brings to order the zoning board of appeals meeting of May 23rd, 2019. Firstly, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 25th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Pending decisions, can I get a motion to approve 3032? Philip Edwards.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye and aye.
Will there be a copy of that by any chance that I could?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I can get back to you. I'll just,
Nobody get mine?
Well, this is the original
Yeah, you
one.
better keep that one.
I can get back to you, just, and I can pick up another in the morning if you want.
Here it is.
Oh, that's an aye.
Last one.
Yeah, I got it. I got it, Gil.
Okay, I'm sure you,
Separate it from the other stuff.
so like slide around here, as long as I don't trip on something.
Okay.
Thanks.
Let me, is there a motion to adjourn case number 3007, case number 3026, case number 3036?
I so moved.
A second?
Second, all in favor?
Aye. Did you forget 3012?
I'm sorry, is there a motion to adjourn 3012?
So moved.
Second.
This is what you emailed, right?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
I know. Pending decisions, 3033. Is there a motion to accept the decision?
Do we have it?
You don't have a record.
We have it now. We have it. You might wanna.
Is there an original, by the way?
Anyone. Captain's neck. Decision for Captain's neck.
Yeah. There's Captain's neck, by the way.
Here's Sadie's decision here.
Got it, one to put in the file?
Let's see.
Stamped.
That's Captain's neck. You want to stamp those?
We didn't do Captain's neck yet.
Where's Mercedes?
Yeah, we have it now.
We did, okay. Back to 3034. Is there a motion to accept the decision, 3034?
3033, right?
3034, Captain's Neck Realty.
Oh, I'm sorry. yeah.
Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
To move?
Board, is there a motion? To approve the decision 3034.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And aye.
Nay.
All right.
Get the nay?
Yeah.
Could I get a copy of that decision? Thank you very much. Appreciate
All right, this is
Thank you.
for the file. Okay, so we never did the Coonahan one, correct?
Not really?
No, we got it, we just handed it up to you.
Right, where is it? One it is, I got it, yeah. Here's the Coonahan one.
Yeah, it's an extra, I don't have the,
Coonahan's. Is there a motion to accept the decision number 3033, Coonahan?
I so moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
And aye. Oh, back on Phillips, were you recused?
Phillips is Flanagan?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, hold on.
I didn't vote.
I see.
Oh, yeah. No, we had that. Oh, we're supposed to,
No,
you have that marked down there. Yeah, no, I'm reading the, mhm.
We're doing you the favor of writing in approved on the Coonahan one, right? Unless you have to
Yes,
write on it.
yes. Do you have the copy in there, or?
You owe me.
Okay. This is Edwards. That's not in there, signed.
It's your file.
This is Captain's Neck. Did you have that? No.
I'm where that file is.
Oh, there's no file. Would you
Here's
put
the
that there?
Captain's next
I
folder.
already have the stamp.
Oh, there's the folder appeared. Slap it in
look at
there.
Here it is, showed up.
I've got
All
it.
right, so I'm missing the Houlihan file.
I just put the,
Okay, put the signed one in there?
Yep.
Okay, signed and everything.
I don't think it's signed.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we didn't sign the,
Here's the Phillips one, by the way, for the file.
he likes to sign what we did and what we didn't do.
Houlihan was bloop, bloop, bloop.
Here it is.
It's floating around somewhere. Oops, okay.
Should be on this
Horse
side.
turnout.
Yeah, things are moving along.
No, that was,
John's here, that'll delete things.
I
they're
suppose.
withdrawing it. No, we haven't said anything.
All right, pending cases.
We're up to that now. No, we haven't gotten to it. We're here.
Simota's
We
there.
have a letter from Mr. Voorhees on the Simota 3035 special conditions. Does that put us in a situation to vote, Wayne?
Well, it's a pending case. You need to open the public hearing, hear any further comments. You can
Okay.
rest your consultant's report, and if so, you can close, and if there's no issues, you can
Okay.
entertain a decision to,
Okay, so on 3035, would you like to outline your,
Yes, we have a pending application for a kayak dock, which extends across a vegetated wetland to the area of the Dug Lagoon, which is referred to as an arm of Shinnecock Bay on the plan. It is elevated above vegetated wetlands sufficiently to allow vegetation to grow underneath. It is also constructed of an open grate deck to allow light penetration, to allow vegetation to grow underneath. It is set back within the property line and the extension of the property line, and it does not exceed 25% of the navigable width of the Dug Lagoon. It also does not propose a float. It only terminates in stairs that go down to the water to allow access to kayaks, and it is consistent with the type of recreational piers that have been approved in this area of the bay. So this has been pending. I know that we did receive an email from a member of the public expressing some concern with respect to this portion of Shinnecock Bay and the Dug Lagoon that you have in the file that's dated April 19th, 2019. We may hear from someone when you go to the floor for comments, and I believe the applicant's consultant is also here.
okay.
So we did discuss this previously in a work session. It has been subject to prior hearings, and you have a draft decision for consideration, should you wish to go ahead with that after hearing from the public.
Thank you. For the applicant.
Good evening. For the applicant, Rob Herman of N Consultants. I'm not sure that I could summarize the project much more eloquently than Chick did, but I will say that it is an application that is similar to one that the board approved about 10 properties to the east in 2015. It is to be elevated as required by the various environmental agencies above the marsh in order and to be constructed with open grate decking in order to allow sunlight penetration to sustain marsh growth beneath it. And it will be constructed entirely of untreated materials. And we do have permits in hand from the New York State DEC, New York State Department of State Coastal Resources Division, and Southampton trustees. We're still in the public notice period for the Army Corps of Engineers, but I've been advised that they have put that in for a letter, what they call a letter of permission, which is like a minor permit. We're just waiting to receive that. So we're basically at the end of the road of the permit process here with the board. If you have any questions, or Chick has any other questions of me, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions from the
Mr. Chairman,
board?
we do have those permits as part of the file as well.
Okay.
The permits that Rob just mentioned.
Any questions from the board?
No.
Any questions from the floor? Please come up, state your name.
Good evening. We are the neighbors. And
State your name for the record,
my name
please.
is Laura Mannheimer, and my husband Steve Mannheimer, and we live in the property right next to them. And I just would like to share some concern we have. We have very good rapport with our neighbors, and we like them very much. We have known them for 25 years, but we have been slightly distraught when we saw the plans. And I guess the reason for it is because we live in a corner of paradise where from our house we have a view that is totally pristine with no human impact. And if you look at that, you will see that on page 1. If you look on page 2, you will see that our houses are really close together, 1, 2, 3, and we are the second house. They are on the left. And the purpose of their dock is to kayak. And what bothers us a little bit is it is a pretty huge structure. When you're talking about 86 feet catwalk, 4 feet wide, 4 feet high, this basically bisects the bay in two because it is very high. And I know that it's not their fault. It's the way you want the boardwalk to be built, 4 feet off the ground to protect the land. But it becomes really visually a visual disaster. And
Ma'am, can I
yes,
just
sir.
interrupt? You have another copy of that?
Oh, of
little letter?
course. Steve, we have, can you give
Our
yours?
environmental consultant.
Okay, I am so sorry. So basically, we are very bothered by the height of the structure because there are many other structures on the Shinnecock Bay, but most of them are very low. They are 2 feet off the ground, and this is huge, and it's out of proportion with the surrounding. And it also will have a very negative impact on the value of a house because our house is mostly on wetland. It was built in 1981. We cannot touch anything. We cannot have a pool. We cannot have a tennis court. And the only thing we have is the beauty of the place. So you have this big structure, and I promise you it's pretty big, next to us, and it kind of destroys everything for all of us sharing this small cove because the lagoon is pretty small. So I am not an environmental expert, but I can tell you that the lagoon really protects a lot of wildlife. It's really a migratory bird shelter and a refuge as well as a nesting place. And on top of it all, we have been kayaking for 25 years. We have 2 kayaks, and if you look at the picture of this one,
Can you leave it on the table? I can put it down on the table facing the board. No,
Put it on the table and then it'll appear on the camera.
Oh, so look at the screen. Turn it the other way.
up there.
Other way.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, great, that's perfect. Okay, you see the channel going out to the bay is very...
The red dot is our house.
Oh,
Would you
Zut,
point
this-
down on your
it's-
picture,
It's,
please?
it's my first time here, guys,
That's
so
okay.
please look at those red fingers. Okay, so look at the bay here. You know, here is their property, and here is where they put the catwalk, and here where they want to put whatever it is. And in order to go to the bay, you have to go through this channel, and this channel is very shallow. So basically, you can only go out with any kind of boat an hour and a half before high tide and an hour and a half after high tide. You have those 3 hours window. And by that time, the water is high enough that you can glide right into the water. And this is, oops. Whoa,
Let me handle
I'm
it.
not good at that, but you're not any better than I am, my love. Okay, and this is what happened. The water is high enough that you can take your kayak and just glide in. So we were wondering, considering the heartbreak it's causing us, and the fact that it's really not pretty at all in terms of scale, if it's really necessary to have this huge boardwalk just to put a kayak in the water when you can put it by itself.
There's an additional concern, is that the house
is rented from time to time. And we wonder whether there are really resources there to police the fact that a motor vehicle, a boat or a ski-doo or something's not going to be used in that. And we feel that at that point, the environment would really be impacted. And why invite that?
We don't have that many places left in Southampton that are really pristine and beautiful. And we're just appealing to your sense of beauty. I don't know if that works, but
Yeah, we're doing this on our own. We're homeowners. We love this community.
and we
And-
like our neighbor too, so we really don't want to get into any contentious relationship with them.
So
But,
another small point is that we use the house all year. This house, because it's a summer house, it's not winterized. It's only used maybe 3 or 4 months a year maximum. And we have to inherit a structure that's longer than the house itself, high enough to intersect our 180-degree view,
that's for a
and
kayak.
create a precedent in our little, as my wife said, a corner of paradise, which is unnecessary.
Well, that's what we have to say.
And it decreases the value of our house.
I have a question for you on,
Yes.
we get these walkways through the wetlands all the time, and the caveat was that by putting the walkway above the wetlands, you're protecting the wetlands. Is that in case of fact, or a pathway through the wetlands to the, which is, in their case, less visually impacted, is the benefit outweighing the path that's right on the ground?
I would certainly say that a pathway on the ground through the wetlands would have a greater impact on the natural environment. When considering aesthetics, that's kind of a different factor, but we really do look at environmental protection.
Right.
Walking or dragging a kayak over the wetlands is going to directly impact the vegetation. It's going to directly impact any species of wildlife that are present in that area. It could potentially create erosion issues if the bog is deteriorated as a result of walking or dragging a kayak over those areas. And that's why these structures are typically elevated. I see Rob standing up in the audience, and I certainly would look to see if there are ways to decrease the length of the structure. I think that the height of the structure, while many of us, all of us, would prefer that it be lower, the agencies, and particularly the DEC, typically looks to see that it is elevated so that you do get light penetration and it doesn't adversely impact the marsh as much. But it may be possible to decrease the length of it, depending on the location of the wetlands, if a path can be created through an upland area to get to a shorter pier structure, and that's what I think we should ask the applicant to address as well.
Does it have to be 4 feet high?
Yes.
You see on this picture,
the
which
problem.
doesn't represent the applicants, but you have, I don't know what, 6 by 6, 4 by 4, whatever, going up,
Probably
a-
4 feet wide.
but they're going up over this. You see these pillars, if you want to call them that, are higher than the dock itself. Is that necessary?
Not always. I guess it depends on the construction. Typically, you'll have cross members and stringers for that open grate decking. I don't know the exact height of this. It says in the caption that it's
It's on Meadow Lane.
less than 4 feet, but
No,
I don't know the exact height.
It's, yes, it says in 4 feet. Well,
Less than, right.
I must say that I don't mind the post. So, I mean, I don't want to give unnecessary grief. The post is okay, it's the height that is so big. And you are right about the length. You know,
Well, the height is
unfortunately, you
not
cannot do
negotiable.
anything about
apparently
it.
not.
And it is,
So I was
this is the
thinking maybe we could
eyesore.
reduce the height of the uprights.
I respectfully like to comment about, we've lived there for 20 odd
Comment
years.
to the board, please.
We've seen, and we keep our property very clean, taking away any debris that washes up in the winter. We have a small path down to the
can see
waterfront.
on this
We have
Oh,
increased
what happened?
number of, we have more birds, wildlife this summer, this past summer. I saw diamondback turtles nesting right in front of our house. I would respectfully disagree that a boardwalk is any better than a small path to the water.
Chip,
This is
Based
looking
on
at the
our
picture, and they
observations
show
of
a
living
path
there.
This
in
is our
front of
path.
their house going down to the water.
Yes.
Evidently, they said they've had that pass for 25 years, which would be a good benchmark to know that if it's caused erosion, wildlife disturbance, or
Please come and see it. It's perfectly.
Well, I guess the
is
question
it
would
something
be,
that
is
you
the
have
path
looked
legal?
at? You know,
path
comparing
bad?
paths
Is it legal?
versus a structure?
Right, you're butting up
Yeah, I
against the
didn't go on the-
DEC and whatever else here,
Yeah,
right?
and we're not the only regulatory agency,
Right.
so you need to know that. And if you put the path in, cleared the wetlands to put that path in,
No, it was there.
after 1977, you needed a permit from the New York State DEC. So, you know, there's a question. We understand what you're saying, but there's at least 3, if not 4 other regulatory agencies that have jurisdiction here and control, and a lot of the design is as was stated, as our environmental consultant stated. For example, the 4 feet height is something that if we were to say, no, we only wanted 2 feet, they would never be able to do it because the other 3 agencies want 4 feet. So the question here is access to the water. And even though you say that you've had that on your property, when I look at the photographs, and we'll let the applicant explain, but I don't see any similar path on their property, so they
On
would have
theirs?
to clear
Well,
wetlands
Yeah,
to
they
do that.
cut
They
it,
cut the grass.
they cut it, it's just grass, and they cut it in
It's more than just
pre-season.
grass, it's wetland species,
No,
but
I
I'll let the
understand.
No,
let
no,
the
no, no.
applicant.
I could probably try to address some of these comments.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks. So just to try to address a couple of different questions that were raised, I can put this photo up. Basically, in this photo, you can see from where you're sitting, this is taken from the applicant's deck. This is the area that's cleared between the deck and the edge of the high marsh, and you see the stake here that marks the landward edge of the catwalk, and then there's a tape here that runs out to where it ends with terminal stairs in the waterway. So in terms of the design, in terms of the length, we have made this as short as we can possibly make it to get over the marsh.
And how
With
many
respe-
feet?
I'm sorry?
How many feet?
I have to look at the plan.
86, I know by heart.
86
feet
feet.
long?
It's 12, it's
86.
12,
You gotta
16,
talk from
and
by the
10.
table there, I can't record you from too far back.
Okay,
there.
thank you, sir.
So the overall length is 86 feet
86.
from the beginning to the end of the stairs. So as we discussed probably a few years ago, again, with the same approval that the board issued 10 properties to the east, the purpose of having a structural fixed point of access that's elevated over the marsh is because it, as your attorney said, it's a question of access to the water. A homeowner cannot be prevented from having access to the water. So the question is, by what means are they going to gain that access? And it's either by a fixed structural point of access or, as described by the neighbor, just sort of creating a pathway through the vegetation. And every time that the Southampton trustees or the Village of Sag Harbor or some of these other agencies have played with the idea of limiting these types of structures, it always comes back to the same notion that it is an actual way of regulating the location and style of access for the homeowner to the water. Because if you don't have a fixed elevated point of access, it's interesting that the neighbor has this picture, because I can it illustrates what I was going to try to explain. You can see for this area here, from one side to the other, you can see how all of the Spartina alterniflora here has been trampled and crushed and lost. And so that is precisely what these agencies are looking to avoid by having these catwalks, because the idea is, number one, if you elevate them, it creates an angle that the sun can shine down and come in underneath the catwalk and continues to sustain the marsh grass. And then more recently, they've had the advent of this open grate decking, which is basically the decking that was in this other photograph, which is the same thing that's proposed here, if I can find it.
It's on the back, it's on the double sided for us.
So this is this open grate decking. It's basically decking that has spacing through the top of it, and the idea is that it's supposed to have 50 to 60% light penetration. So the idea is that visually, I completely understand the fact that having no catwalk would be better than having a catwalk, because you don't have to look at it. But we're here for a wetland permit, and we have to go to all these other agencies for the wetland permits. And so to get what is considered the most environmentally correct way of doing this is to have one fixed point of access so that you're not trudging through the marsh, you're not dragging kayaks or dinghies or whatever, canoes you have that can just sort of end up destroying the marsh grass between the upland and the waterway. And the last point, just in terms of the elevation, this is actually a fight that we've been having with some of these agencies for years, because as this open grate decking came into play, the Southampton trustees were one organization that has really been trying to fight to allow these catwalks to be elevated lower. Where that's really stopping is with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, because they have interagency coordination with National Marine Fish and Wildlife Services and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. And they will not relent on this 4-foot height. We have tried to argue with them about it, because we have seen in some cases where the open grate decking at a lower elevation can still allow marsh growth beneath it. But they eventually started taking us and other agents to task, saying if you can find any published scientific literature that suggests that we can lower these elevations without negatively impacting the marsh, we'll consider adjusting our position. And we went about that, and I can't find that literature. All the literature shows that the higher the elevation, the better the success and the vitality of the marsh beneath it. And even the New York State DEC's latest Tidal Wetlands Guidance Memorandum for docks suggests use both of the open grate and the high elevation above the marsh. So to have this structure, we're kind of locked into this design until something changes in that regard. I mean, if there's a question about the height of the posts, I mean, the posts are not designed to stick up high. I don't know how much that would affect it. I mean, we can certainly try to keep the post cut as close to the decking as possible.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
With the other agencies, in the last 10 years, have they ever approved a path on grade?
Through a vegetated wetland, no, because the clearing of the marsh in order to get to the water would be
All the
illegal.
other agencies have signed off on this design?
Correct.
Okay.
Let me just make a comment.
Yes, sir.
A comment on the picture of the launch. First of all, most of that all the vegetation gets crushed by the ice in the winter. You're welcome to come and look at the impact over these 30 years or so that we've lived there to see whether there's been any visible impact with a small path to the water. And you will also, I can also tell you from my own experience, that the vegetation grows back every time it's not used. In other words, there's no degradation of the vegetation because of the access from a kayak. And it's something we've lived with. It's not something I'm imagining. We are active sports folks and have observed this. So the big issues here, the takeaways are this is a degradation to the value of our house. It's a ruining of a pristine area, one of the few that are left in the village. And we think that for the amount of use that the property owner plans or could possibly use this in a dwelling that's only occupied for 3 months a year, it's a rather an imposition to us. And there's not much more we can say. And thank you for listening to us.
You're welcome. Anybody else like to speak to this issue in the floor? And close it for decision, folks?
Yep.
Can we get a motion to close for decision?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. You're welcome. Where are we? Okay, case number 3037, Lifton Green for the applicant.
Good evening for the applicant, John Bennett.
One we were just discussing? Notice?
You made your presentation. Did we get a report from ARB?
3035.
No, but I just want to talk to John about it.
3035.
Oh, yeah, 3035.
Yeah, this one in there.
I just want to add some stuff to the record.
Now, did we determine that the ARB was lead agency here?
Well, there's
No,
no lead
this-
agency, there's not a secret issue.
This is this, if I may, the section of the code the applicant seeking relief is where there's a threatened historic structure, and it gives this board basically some jurisdiction to consider these kind of applications. Your statute requires a referral to the Architectural Review Board before you close the hearing and act. You did refer that, and my understanding it's still pending, but I think Mr. Bennett just wants to add some more information to the record at this time.
Okay, so when we close the case, it goes to...
No,
No, you have to keep it open.
you got to keep it open until they give us a report.
Okay.
So, I'll try to be brief, because we'll have to come back after the report, and we are still pending before the Architectural Review Board. But what I did want to do is tell you, first of all, I wanted to give you a case, the Mitchell Family Real Estate Limited Partnership case, in which the board did allow an existing primary structure, single-family residence on the property on southwesterly corner of Great Plains Road and Cooper's Neck to be changed in use to a guest house and a large house to be constructed on the property. The purpose being so that smaller structure, about the same size as the structure that you have before you here, could be preserved without addition. Our whole position has been that it's better to preserve the house on the property, which is a contributing structure, in the same size, without trying to add any additions onto it, because that'll affect the historic integrity of the property. So I give you that in terms of precedent, number one. Number two, a strange thing happened at the Architectural Review Board meeting. In the following manner, and I've highlighted it in a letter that I did send on May 16th to the ARB. You'll remember at the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, Mr. Grace appeared, and he said some, and we took this right from the video transcript. He said that he thought we had prepared an excellent plan. Didn't think there was any need to oppose. He wanted to have some dialogue and an agreement that if the utility pole on his driveway we could take our utilities directly from Ox Pasture, he would appreciate that. We said we would. He also said that he didn't really enjoy, and what you have here is a composite. This is the survey of the property that's before you, and we overlaid on the Grace property, which is a rather unusual shaped property. It's sort of like a twisted barbell. It has a portion of the property directly on the corner of Halsey Neck and Knox Pasture, and then there's the houses down the driveway to the south. And then Mr. Grace stated that they don't really enjoy looking at the house, which is currently right here, and that it would probably have, I'm quoting Mr. Grace, it would probably have less of an impact. I think it's probably to our benefit to have it moved away from our house, all of which seemed like understandably and logically, Mr. Grace was supportive of this plan, which takes the current single-family residence and moves it probably another 100 feet away from his house. So, and we told him we would work with him on screening and moving the utilities away, all of which seemed very neighborly and reasonable and logical. So we were somewhat surprised when Mr. Grace's lawyer, Ms. Van John, appeared at the ARB meeting and started raising issues with the relocation of the house, which quite candidly, very candidly, not only took me by surprise, but was directly contrary to her client's statements, and also seems to me to be illogical. Ms. Van John was saying that that would put the house closer to the Grace's property, and I'll concede that the moving of the existing single-family residence to the new location as a guest house would put the house closer to a portion of the Grace property. But it's strange that she said that in light of the fact that in response to Mr. Guzzowitz's question about the relocation of the house, Mr. Grace had quite logically said that he was in favor of it, and I think it would have less of an impact here, particularly in light of the fact, and this is really speaks for itself, is that we'd be moving it to an area of the Grace property where this is a tennis court, a proposed tennis court that the board was kind enough to grant to the Graces about 1.5 years ago. So the house would be being moved to a portion of the Grace property that is probably, I sort of scaled it, more than 100 feet further away, and not in the habitable area of the Grace property, because there's nothing that's going to go on here but accessory uses, a tennis court, etc. So I don't know if she's not here this evening. I don't know if Ms. Van John is going to be at the ARB meeting, but I just wanted to let you know that there had been some contrary statements made by the Grace's counsel, contrary to the statements made by Mr. Grace, and what I thought were very logical statements made by Mr. Grace at the ZBA meeting. We'll see what happens at the next ARB meeting. So I would just want to let you know that was happening and ask you to keep it open as you have to for all purposes, because you have to await the advisory report of the Architectural Review Board. I think the board, hard to say, I thought they liked the house, liked the location, but they wanted to keep it open. So.
Do you have any knowledge as to whether Mr. Grace conferred with Mrs. Grace?
I wouldn't know that. I don't know whether Mr. and Mrs. Grace retained Ms. Van John, or maybe I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Have you had an opportunity to talk to Mr. Grace about him is in favor of it and his attorney opposed?
I can't, ethically bound. I cannot speak to Mr. Grace because he is represented by counsel, and he was not present at the meeting. Okay. So maybe, I'm hoping this will shake out as some sort of misunderstanding, because it just seems to be, it sort of speaks for itself. If you're living here, and there's a house here, and you testified at the meeting before you gentlemen that you preferred the location here, which is a heck of a lot further away from the house, and said you didn't like the house looming over you and wanted to move it to an area of the property that is very far away from the house and is only going to ever be accessory structures, doesn't seem to be logical.
if I'm correct, the ARB really doesn't care about the setbacks from the neighbor's property. They care more about the preservation of the house and the location of the house as far as being a contributing structure. Is that correct?
Yes, but one of the things, I was very candid with them and saying that there are two principles of preservation that are sort of at odds in the ARB, and I told them that they were really going to have to choose which one they found more important, and they all acknowledge that. One says you leave a house in the location because part of its historic nature is its location in a lot of instances. Usually when people are going into an argument to move a house away, put a historic house in a different location, it's going to take the house further away from the public view. So for example...
Well, that's what happens here. The new house is going to completely block the old house, if you left it in its existing location.
Yes, number one.
Yeah, true.
Number one. And number two, usually the concern people have about moving a house away from its historic location is most of the time they're trying to move it away, further away, to accommodate some other improvements. A good example is the carriage house as 88 Gin. The ARB said they didn't want it moved because it was so much of a part of the sense of place of Gin. And I think there was sometime there was a request to move the Cooper Kendrick house, but they didn't. The village didn't want that moved because of its prominent location. Here we're actually bringing the house forward. Number one, and number two, the whole idea is into creating it as a guest house as opposed to trying to add on to this. Is that there's no way you can fully protect this as a contributing structure, in our view, by adding on to it. 2 lots down, there was the old, Lloyd Smith's, the Lloyd Smith estate, gardener's house, if you remember that, and it had this beautiful attached greenhouse to the back. That became the wing, a small wing of a much larger house. So that whole contributing structure essentially got subsumed into a much larger house. And I think the board was very understanding and liked the idea that we're not trying to do anything like that. We're just trying to preserve this house, bring it forward. But we'll see how it shakes out. I'm guardedly optimistic that they'll give us a supporting report, but we don't have it now. They wanted to think about it, wanted to come back, so that's where we are. But I did want to give you a little, I wanted to show you that there had been precedent from the board in terms of this sort of application, number one, and I also wanted to update you about some of the confusing, contradictory testimony we had. And that's all. And I'd ask you to keep it open for all purposes.
Is there any other comment from the board?
No.
The floor? Is there a motion to adjourn for all purposes?
So moved.
Second?
I'm sorry, did I answer the question? Or
All
did I-
in favor?
Yes, you got it.
Aye.
Mr. Hurwitz? Okay.
Aye.
Didn't want to-
Ayes, ayes.
Too much information.
Okay.
You all right?
New cases. Case number 3039. Scott to get off.
Richard Scott, architect, here for Scott. Take it off.
Affidavit of posting, affidavit of mailing. You need the mailed receipts?
as well?
Yeah.
There were 17 sent and 11 returned, just, so you know? So the house is located on the corner of Skinner Road and North Main Street. 261 North Main is the address. We're asking for relief in two areas, really. The eastern portion where there's a covered porch, an existing covered porch. You see in this photograph right here. It has a roof over the posts that we plan to reuse, and a short railing that's only about 23 inches high that surrounds the porch. So the idea is, since the porch is only about 5 feet of usable space between the railing and the house, the owners would like to extend it only 3 feet so that they can use it to put a table and chairs and sit out there. It's an area off one of their living spaces. So in order to do that, we're adding 3 feet to the deck, extending the roof out in kind, reusing the existing posts that hold up the roof now, and adding steps all the way around so there's not that division between their property and the porch itself. Help it out visually. Then on the west side.
So Rick, just before you get too far, just help us identify what the relief that you're asking for there.
Sure. To remove the existing covered porch is about 244 square feet. We want to rebuild the porch with a 3-foot extension toward the east of 88 square feet for a total of 332 square feet.
So what are the setbacks?
Those should be
What
indicated
relief,
on the
what section of the code are we looking for relief there?
The setback on the north side doesn't change, it's just an extension of the existing. So the setback from Main Street
But you're
to
extending it, expanding it?
extending the porch to the eastwardly, not at all to the north. So the new setback would be 75.4 feet, not including the steps, which I don't think typically get included. Am I right about that?
So what is the front yard setback for the,
What zone are we?
no, he said they want to extend the porch to the east, and he's got 75 feet after he builds it. What is the front yard setback?
Currently, but you're expanding a nonconformity there, yes.
Yeah.
So the existing setback is 3 feet more, 78.
But the impact is going to be the Skinner Street with the 3 feet, not North Main Street.
That's what we were trying to figure out on your surveys, because your application doesn't explain it, the form doesn't explain it. You did indicate in square footage what it is, but I'm trying to get a handle on what is the actual section of the code you're asking for relief.
Oh, I
and I
understand.
believe it has to do with setbacks, as the board is mentioning here.
So the side yard setback, do I have it drawn? I think that's in.
Like about 2.85 feet?
That's what's there existing, 2.
It's not a side yard, though.
That's
It's a
the
front
front
yard.
That's not what's required. The required side yard, but that's not a side yard, that's a front
Front
yard.
yard.
Right. Those are 2 front yards.
Right.
So the front yards in this zone, if I recall, are,
What zone are you in?
Was it 80 feet?
I think it's 80 feet.
80.
The zone is R12.5.
Or 12.5.
So your front yard is 30 feet.
30.
How big is the lot?
In area, it is 15,166 square feet.
Still 30 feet. Asking to expand the deck at a setback of 3 feet, where 30 feet is required. Is that what was noticed? Do we know what was noticed?
all the way back into here.
Want to put that down?
Besides the 3 feet of the deck. So you know, I don't mind the 3 feet of the deck. I don't think that's gonna.
You want to see this?
Yeah, I'd like to just see what we noticed,
Yes,
make
that's
sure.
Elaine.
I mean, that's my. Can I see the here, the railing of the bushes is sort of in character, yeah.
And it contains it.
Yeah, yeah.
So is the existing deck at, porch at 2.9 feet,
Yes.
and you're proposing 3?
No.
Just the roof is showing.
I'm just looking at your, trying to figure out what your,
The extension of the deck is 3 feet towards the east, but it doesn't change towards the north. So the 2.9 feet would remain.
so I'm looking at your plan, and what that dimension is, if you can help me with
This
3
3
feet.
feet represents the extension of the deck towards the
East-west.
east. Correct.
that. Okay, so this 2.9 is the setback?
Yes,
Is that shown on the survey? Because the survey actually says 2.8.
2.85.
And then what's this bump out here?
That's the walkway, stone walkway.
Okay, I agree.
That's the extension of the stone walkway that's there now.
Great. Okay, so
We're
the,
moving that out.
so the porch and the steps are all at 2.8 or 2 point,
Well,
or
it's
2.9?
2.85, and I rounded up to 2.9 on this drawing.
The second floor is staying the same?
Yes,
We're not, it doesn't bump out at all, it stays exactly, okay.
except for the roof over the porch. That's not really the second floor, but the roof would be extended 3 feet to the east in kind,
Oh, okay, that's,
so that it covers the porch.
I think what's giving me more, I'm not as troubled by 3 feet more to the porch, which will give you an 8-foot porch, which you can get chairs and be able to move around and use. But the impact of the stairs all the way across the front, getting rid of the walkway and the bushes, because that's 28 feet of stairs in the front yard that I think, and taking away a walkway and the bushes and the railings,
The walkway and the bushes,
strong
Will remain-
change in the impact of.
the walkway and the bush, there's a gate there now between the bushes. So the gate would just move over along with the stone walkway. So from the street, I don't think anyone would notice this difference, and you can see
Well,
that.
you would from Skinner Street.
You can see that the images of, on the bottom right corner of the front page. One is a computer model to the far right, and the one to the left is a photograph that shows the hedge, there's a hedge and a gate. So that hedge and the gate would remain proportionally the same, only 3 feet farther towards the east. If you look at the structure itself, it's kind of hard to look at it and notice a big difference there. Because the shrubbery and the gate are going to
On the second photo, you show all
hide.
these wraparound steps, but on the last photo, you don't show any steps.
Which last photo?
The one on the right.
This
one over
photo,
there.
there's no steps, and this one, there's a huge set of wraparound steps, so. And then on the plan, you show a huge set of wraparound steps.
Yes, somehow the steps didn't transpose to that image.
One side, is that a
But-
wall, or is that a trellis? What are you putting on the
Oh, there's a
on the
trellis
right,
there
and that
now,
is-
so we're extending the 3-foot trellis, where that trellis out 3 feet as well. But with the vegetation there and the gate there, you don't even see that little railing that's on the porch. What you see is the structure above the railing from about waist high or chest high as you drive by or walk by that.
It shows the railing right in the picture you have. The third picture over, there's,
You can see a little piece of it, sure, from one little space, but it's a very small portion of it. If the railing is a big issue, I think maybe the Architectural Review Board, which has to review this, might have something to say about it.
well, the steps are, that come into the setback, and that's our issue.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The steps come down into the front yard. So expanding the porch 3 feet, and then the steps actually go out a lot farther. They go out 5.1 feet. So you got 3 feet plus 5 feet. Now you're encroaching over 8 feet further out with structure.
How high is the porch from the grade?
Well, it varies, but grade varies. The grade drops from
That's
west towards the
maximum.
east. It's 35 inches.
Because as you extend it out, there's going to be further grade drop, right? So,
Correct.
So the option here is either, if you had no steps, you'd have to have a railing.
Well, the code is 30 inches, and
Is
where
it
the
more
edge
than
of that
30
deck
inches?
is, would probably be less than 30 inches.
But you have 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, 5 steps up
Right.
on the east side?
Yeah, because the steps extend out further, so as they extend, the grade continues to drop.
So you're proposing steps around the perimeter of the porch as opposed to putting a railing?
Correct. On the east side and south side. And again, if the steps are a big issue, I can certainly talk to the owners about.
They're sort of a big issue to me. To me, it's a, you know, I don't mind the 3 feet, but then when you add the steps, now we're talking about a little over 8 feet, and that becomes more of an issue for me.
Are you,
So
your plan here shows symbol, what is that on the south and east side of the slate walk? You could put a hedge there, because right now you just have some shrubs, but is that gonna be a continuous hedge?
he has, he doesn't need a variance here.
No, he needs it over
No,
here.
this is the slate, this is the walkway.
Almost on the street.
Right, what's
I know,
that symbol
Conrad lives
inside
right
the
across the
walkway?
street, so I know
Here?
the house well.
Yeah, that.
It's,
That's
there's a house over here, but
meant
it's,
to indicate the stone.
you know, it's not gonna be a visual impact.
I couldn't write slate walkway in there because you
Might have
wouldn't
been.
see it, so I wrote it. where the
You know
steps
who
would
was
be.
over here was,
Okay, so there's no shrubs or anything, it
No.
would just be grass up to the
Yes,
slate walk? Okay.
but the house is derelict, but it's also historic.
Oh, the greenhouse.
Yeah. But it's removed. You can't.
Rick, you want to tell us what the other relief
They're
is
supposed
that
to be
you're
doing
seeking?
some work on that.
Sure.
RLW4 is the sidewalk.
I know, but
On
this
this-
isn't gonna impact anybody
No,
over
no,
there.
it's there now.
Yeah.
So there was an addition made to the house some time ago, probably in the 80s. That's a low-pitched roof with a ridge that runs east-west. And there's a cutout underneath that that provided a kind of protected entry to what became the front door, which is really a door into the kitchen. It's a little bit awkward and not very good-looking. So the owners asked if we could fill that little corner in and just extend the roof out and make a new, more formalized entry on the west side.
It says foyer, is that what you mean?
Yeah,
That'll be the new entry.
yes.
You
The
point
new
that
win-
out, so
The new entry is centered on that little west wing.
where is that on the plan?
This
On the
is
south side.
no entry
Southwest corner.
doors. This is west over here. This is a covered roof held up by 2 columns. Right now, there's no extension over the roof. And right now, the entrance is right in this corner with a door that comes in towards the side corner of here. And then through a small door into this kitchen, living, dining space. So it's this 24 square feet, 25 square feet about.
What I'm having trouble is that you need the relief from Skinner Street, is that correct? And the front yard setback is 30 feet, correct?
That's correct.
But I don't know, I can't find the measurement of how far off Skinner Street this starts. Is it on here somewhere?
2.8.
No, with the proposed structures. It's not on the survey.
It's not a measurement.
So what I
listed
see on the survey is a proposed addition that's shaded,
Correct,
5 by 8, 5.8 by 6.1?
yes.
Oh, okay.
And then
okay.
adjacent
Not
to
the whole
that-
foyer, it's just a little corner of the
Yeah,
foyer.
just
Okay.
24 square feet, 25 square feet of the corner.
And what relief is needed for that?
I'm not sure any relief is needed for it. It's already covered by a roof. It's already got hardscape on it.
But you asked for relief for that. You asked,
The 126 square feet covered entry to the western portion of the dwelling?
I think it's probably the roof overhang itself that needs the relief.
Well, you also see their proposed roof over, so what is that, a porch?
Yes, that's the roof extension that's not there now that will create a protected entry.
And what's the setback of that porch? It's not shown on the survey.
right, no.
The setback of the porch roof, you're asking.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. It says proposed roof over. There's
See a
no
line, but I
setback
don't
from Skinner.
I don't see the number on it.
But you're sort of building a deck under that roof too. So there's a roof and then there's a deck.
A patio, it's not a wood deck.
So that's, or is it raised or is it?
Well, there's a patio there now, on grade.
But we need some revisions on the survey so that we can follow, make sure what's being granted. So you need the setbacks to the proposed porch. You need the setbacks to the proposed addition because what the building department believes by scaling, it's less than 30 feet from Skinner. Therefore, you need relief.
I understand.
What's the required rear yard for this? Assuming the west line is the rear yard, and is that a dimension of 43.8 to the porch?
Yes. 43.3. I'm sorry, it is 8.
So your required rear yard is 35, so that you comply with that.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have a non-conforming shed on the property?
I wasn't aware that that was not,
Is that still there?
that frame shed and yeah, that's still there.
So Rick, I didn't see in your application, it would be very helpful if you provide us with a copy of the certificate of occupancy, current any and all, as well as any prior decisions this board or any other board made on this property, so it'd be helpful if we know that there was expansions of the nonconformities in the past,
Okay?
revisions to the surveys, but I need that just from a procedural standpoint, but I don't know if there's any other comments the board needs or wants them to address with respect to the plans.
No, I mean, I would just emphasize, I do have a problem with transforming this somewhat contained porch into, a more kind of open, slightly more intrusive porch area onto Skinner. So if there was a way architecturally that you could bump out the porch area but still have it look more like the porch in the first drawing on the left.
Mm-hmm. I'll express that to the owners. I'm sure there's a way we can work that out.
That's my feeling also.
Setback from the north is what it is. You can't do much about that. The house is almost in the street, and it's been there for many, many years.
You have oil tanks across the street too. A nice
Oh,
view.
yeah. You got that new house there. It's up for sale.
Question,
New
can,
lots.
can we visit the architectural review board before we proceed with the,
Certainly can.
finish this up?
You want to keep this open until you visit them and get back whatever comments they have, that would be very helpful.
I would like to do that.
But you, in the meantime, the information that's, the measurement plans, the measurements that are missing on the
Sure,
survey
yep.
and on the plan.
Now I understand what you need to see. yeah.
Well, they're calling me up and sending me emails.
Okay. Any further comments? Board, floor?
No, he's got some things to answer, and
Yep. Is there a motion to adjourn for all purposes?
so moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Voila.
Next case, number 3040, to me, Latham Shea Kelly Dubin Incorporated.
Are you here advocating for the sign or against it? I'm going to have you against it.
I'm here for, and I'm not only the attorney, but I'm also, I guess, the applicant, so I've got to answer to both. But no, I'm here
Normally
for
we're
it.
here in opposition, so.
For the applicant, please introduce yourself.
Yes. Patrick Fife, Toomey, Latham, Shea, Kelly, Dubin, and Quateraro. I guess here as counsel and also here as the applicant as well. Our firm recently moved into 200 North Sea Road as a tenant from over on Hill Street, where we had been previously for over 15 years. And we're just seeking a variance for a freestanding sign. It complies in all respects with setback requirements. It's setback more than 20 feet from both Prospect Street and North Sea Road. It meets the village's size requirements. It's only 16 square feet when the code allows 24. It's only 4 feet in height. The code allows for 6 feet. The problem that we have is it's a very unusual layout, this property. It's a pre-existing non-conforming building. It is actually set back more than 40 feet from Prospect Street. And I think technically the sign, it's in the front of the building. The front of the building faces Prospect Street. But the setback on the property line from North Sea Road is 1.1 feet. The building touches the property line there. It's almost on the property line. The sign is going to be right here. It's basically at an angle at the intersection.
You can see it.
So photo here kind of shows, we tried to tuck it in as far back as we could and stay within the setbacks. So again, we comply with the setbacks of 20 feet on both. Even though it's actually interesting, even though the building's 1.1 feet away from the property line, again, on that same side, we're 20 feet away from the property line with the sign location. In addition, we're actually, because there's a very large buffer here from where the pavement ends and the property line begins, you have this large grass area with what I call this odd staircase to nowhere. I've always passed it and wondered what it was there for. It just goes up into the grass. But the sign itself is going to be over 40 feet from the physical road, both Prospect and North Sea Road. The board's granted similar relief on 2 other applications in the past, 97 North Sea Road and 78 White Street, which the board approved last year. In that case, I know the building was further away from the road, but the sign, in fact, was only 11 feet from the road. Again, here we're 20 feet away. That sign was also larger. This sign's smaller than 2 variances that you've granted in the past under 116.3D2. Again, the only thing that we're not in compliance with is the 1.1 distance from the property line on North Sea Road. Just two other, I guess, significant features, I think, that warrant the granting of the variance here is, one, the sign is, as you can see here from the Google Street View, where it's going to be located, the elevation's about 5 to 6 feet above the road. So to the extent that there might be any potential concern that a sign is going to obstruct sight lines, you're not going to have that here. And then second is, as I said, this very large buffer, which is kind of what necessitates this sign. I'm putting the sign in the front of our space here. Not only are you high up, but you're over 50 feet from the actual road. And because of this bump out, which is where the building actually gets really close to the property line, it also obscures the ability to see. We are going to have a small sign just right by the, right under the light, right above or right below the light there.
Are you the only tenant in the building?
No, there are two other tenants in the building.
What if they want signs in the front too, then?
I guess they'd have to ask the landlord for that permission and then come to the board. No one has.
We could end up with 3 or 4 signs here.
Pays first.
I guess first in time, first in right, one. Two, I don't know if that's something that they've asked the landlord for. And obviously, they wouldn't be able to put it in that location, given that we've put it there and there'd be limits under the code on the height and the size. We've tried to make it as small as possible. Again, it's only 16 square feet, where the code would have allowed for 24. And also kept it very low at the hedge line. It's tucked in an area, you can see here, there's a bit of a curve where the parking lot is, and we tried to put it right up against there. After going back and forth with the sign company, this just seemed to be the most compliant and the best location, given the circumstances that we were facing with the building being where it is.
Is it going to be on white posts like that, or is it going to be screened underneath the sign?
No, white posts.
So what would be your options that would not require a variance?
I don't think we'd be able to, I guess potentially you might be able to put it, well, actually, we really wouldn't, because we wouldn't be able to have a freestanding sign, given that the building, the issue is the code requires, if you have a freestanding sign, that the building be set back 40 feet or more from the street line. And given we have 2 street lines here, I guess it was the building department's interpretation that we needed the variance. I mean, arguably, I think you could say we don't really need one, because we meet the street line location on Prospect, and the sign is in front of the building, and the building faces Prospect. It's, I guess it was the interpretation of the building department, because we've angled the sign towards North Sea Road, just to be on the safe side and do what's best and what's required. We're here to ask for a variance, just to make sure there's no question that the sign is legal in all respects.
Patrick, are there any signs on the west side of the building? You gave us some pictures, and I think
There's one, I think.
those signs are not there, right?
On which?
The west side of the building?
The number, I believe, no, the numbering is there, where it says 200 North Sea. No, those signs are not there, no.
You took over their space, Evinger's?
Actually, yes, we did take over that space, so those signs are not there. I think those were previously approved signs, I think by let's check.
Can you go and put a sign on the side of the building?
It's something that we could do with ARB approval. You could put a sign there, but again, given the fact that the building itself at that location is quite a distance from the road, and given the angle as well, away from Prospect and the intersection.
No, I'm talking about the west side of the building, like the other one was on the building.
You can put a sign there. That is an option. But again, given the fact that the sign does have more visibility in this location, And the sign is, I think, difficult from that distance, given the elevation, and also given the distance from the road, to put the sign on the building.
There's a sign on the, is it an art gallery over there?
There is an art
Big
gallery, the
sign.
next space over, I
Right,
believe they
that's a
have a
pretty big
sign.
sign on the wall, isn't it? I don't even know.
Yes, that's a big sign.
Is that approved by anyone, I wonder? Huge.
I think we included all the approvals that were on file with the building department.
But in any case, that sign is very big, so
I believe this sign is smaller than that sign.
I
I
think
just
it is,
based on
too.
my visual, I don't have a measurement of that
I
sign.
think it is too. If you put a little sign on the building, you'd have to get rid of Shea, Kelly, Dubin, and Quateraro, and the rest of the team.
We do have a fair number of names. So, I mean, I just given the fact that we're staying within and well below what the code would otherwise require. And I think in that White's Lane decision from last year, well, not the decision, but the application itself, and if you want, I can just for the file submit it, a copy of what the applicant had submitted there.
You remember it.
Yeah, there was just a whole survey of signs. I know there was a question whether some were legal or
Right.
not legal, but I think in terms of the character of this area, in particular along North Sea Road, I think almost every other business has a freestanding sign, many of which far exceed the size of this sign. So it's certainly consistent with the character of what you would see along North Sea Road.
You put the sign on the building, nobody's going to see it. They're going to drive right by it. Also, you have the train trestle there, and they put all kinds of banners up there all year. And you have Fowler's right across the street. So,
Yeah, I think this sign is also smaller than the Fowler sign, but again, in that particular area, this is the type of sign you see, and that's why we'd like to have a similar sign in that location. And again, I think with respect to just, it's really the angle of it that I guess is what is the reason we're here. I think had we turned it and it's just facing Prospect,
you're not going to see it.
you're not going to see it, but it's.
You can see it from Prospect.
Right, Prospect people.
You don't want clients in Prospect.
Take any clients anywhere. So no, I wouldn't say that. I don't want to offend anybody on any street.
Okay.
Patrick, would you, your firm and/or the owner entertain that you wouldn't put any signs on the west side of the building while this sign exists?
It's not something that we considered. I think we were contemplating a very small sign possibly. I think even smaller than what was
On the building?
on the building by the prior,
On the west side of the building?
potentially on the west side. I think actually not in that location, but near where the 200 North Sea.
It almost seems like a sign that would direct the people into your area rather than the other areas would be efficacious. In other words, all right, they see your sign, maybe they're gonna walk in the other offices or the gallery or something else. So maybe it should be near the door.
Maybe buy some art.
There is going to be a very, very small sign by the door so that people, when
Okay.
they actually park, will be able to identify
Right.
that we're in Suite A as opposed to.
Just over the door, right?
Well, that's
It's
enough
not
sign.
even over the door. I think
Put it
it's,
on the
I
door.
think it may, I think they have a temporary sign up
Yeah,
there.
there is something in
Now,
there.
it's maybe not much bigger than one of the nameplate signs you have up here. It's probably
Well, you
about
don't need a
this
sign
big.
on the west side then, you wouldn't think.
No, and the underlying purpose of the code is, for the 40-foot setback, is that if your building is less than that, you have the ability, under the code, to put a sign on the building, and that serves as your signage to that part of the street. It's only if your building is set back further, the theory being maybe you can't see it because of the size of the sign, then you can get a detached ground identification sign. So that's why I asked the question, if
Well,
you know, you have the opportunity to put a
Sure.
conforming sign on the west side of the building,
Except the
and
ones going
it's
up on
only
the
a
highway.
foot from the street. On the other hand, you're asking for the ground identification sign. I don't think the village would want to see both signs, but that's up to this board.
Somebody will.
Might get boycotted. Anyway, anybody else like to speak to this matter? Floor, board?
I only have only one question. How did you get elected to make this application? And why didn't we
It's
get,
not-
like, the esteemed Mr. Steve Latham?
It could be because my name's not on the sign.
I guess the question I truly have is, would you be allowed, without a variance, to put a sign on the west side of the building, approximately the same size as your freestanding in-the-ground sign? And wouldn't that be acceptable to you?
I think you would have a right to put it there. I think two things are, one, although the building is very close in this, it wouldn't be the same size in this particular location. Although the building is only 1.1 feet away from the property line here, it's significantly further in this location, given the angle of the building, but also that additional 20-plus foot I'll call it buffer between the actual pavement and where the property line starts. Also, the angle of the building doesn't run parallel to the property line. It runs away from the property line. So the sight line is much more difficult in terms of visibility standpoint.
Useless.
It's not a very visible location. And it's not, it doesn't run, because of the way the building is oriented, it doesn't run parallel either to the property line or to the street.
Right, and would it add to the architecture of the building? I doubt it.
I don't think it would.
What bothers me most about the sign is the white legs that hold it up. It's almost, if you could make those very neutral, so that, you have a sign without these huge white posts holding it up, I think it would be a more pleasing.
From an aesthetic standpoint?
Well, see what I'm saying? I got rid of the posts and it just.
I don't know. I'm not, I'll be honest, I'm not sure about the center post there, if that's something that is part of the actual proposal or not.
No, but I mean, you could paint them gray or paint them,
I think they would
neutral
also,
color.
this is going to be a sandblasted, wood post, so I don't think it's going to be as stark white as
Or
it
maybe
shows
if they use
here either.
pipes or something, something that the sign alone is there, but the mechanism holding the sign disappears.
Yeah.
Well, I think the sandblasting, I wish, I don't have an actual sample of it.
That's the sign.
Yeah,
I'm
seen it.
saying whatever holds it
That's the
up.
post.
Well, I think the posts are going to be I don't think they're going to be as bright white as this.
So what I'm saying is that rather make them disappear as much as you can. You can do it by pipe or painting them a earth tone color, or you could landscape under the sun, just to, I think it would soften the starkness of the sign and the location. That's part of what I've had, it's just this bold starkness. I don't mind the sign so much. It's an attractive sign, like you said, sandblasted sign, but the
Is the sign going to be lit?
No.
And if it's white, the weed eater guys are gonna chop it up.
yeah. So, that's my comment.
Okay.
Do you have to go to the ARB?
They will,
I
yes.
think we will for the sign, so I think the ARB would probably, if
So you get rid of the
it
posts.
had that concern, would make some modifications to the posts.
No, you can have the sign, no posts.
I'll be holding it there. That will be my next task.
Okay, anybody have any further comments on this?
No, not me either.
What is your pleasure, folks?
Okay with me.
You want to get rid of it now?
Sure.
He doesn't.
Close it for decision. Close it for a decision, only in light of what you've done with White Street and everything else.
All right, is there a motion to close for decision?
Yes.
I'll
So moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Thank you very much.
all right.
Have a good holiday weekend, everybody.
Lastly, case number 3041 Boatman's Lane.
Hastings? Nice down there, right? Yeah. Let's have it. Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry, for the applicant.
I wasn't sure. Put the site plan.
Please introduce yourself, sir.
So Rob Herman of N Consultants on behalf of the applicant. This is an application for wetlands permit. There are no zoning variances required. The application proposes a very similar but somewhat less extensive project than what was approved by Wetlands Permit 2584 in 2008. At that time, the same owner had proposed a second-story addition with some related footprint expansion and construction of a detached pool house at the south end of the existing house. The current project with the revised architectural design eliminates that second-story addition and the detached pool house in favor of an attached two-story addition at the south end of the house, landward of the existing pool, which is here. The addition will serve to expand two existing bedrooms on the first floor and provide what will essentially become an attached pool house addition with the creation of two new bedrooms above it. There is currently a detached deck here at the south end of the house, which will be replaced with an attached 468 square foot deck addition at the end of the addition. So the entire new construction here is the two-story addition with the attached deck at the southerly end of it. I noticed not included in the notice, but included with our application project description is an approximately 418 square foot expansion of the existing swimming pool patio here. Sorry, I'm pointing to the wrong thing. Which is between the existing pool and the proposed addition. And then over the existing two-story portion of the house, there is a roughly 800 square foot portion where the roof ridge is being elevated from an existing height of 20.67 to 27.17. And that really is just to increase the headroom in the second story. The wall plate is currently just under 6 feet. And there are folks inhabiting this house that are a few inches taller than I am. So they're looking to increase the headroom in that portion of the house. As mitigation for the wetland permit, we are proposing various wetland mitigation measures that are similar to that which were proposed and required as conditions of the prior approval. Probably most notably and really a significant improvement is the fact that under the prior plan, there were two traditional septic systems proposed as an upgrade. Both would be located completely within the 200-foot wetland setback. But now with the introduction of these IA low nitrogen sanitary systems, there are two OWTS units proposed within the 200-foot jurisdictional area here and here, but they both tie to a septic field that will be located more than 400 feet from wetlands, well outside the wetlands jurisdictional area, really as far from wetlands as physically possible up here by Halsey Neck Lane. There is, as with the prior approval, a proposed drainage system of leaders, gutters, and dry wells. We have proposed here to reduce lot coverage by impervious surfaces by removing almost 7,000 square feet of the existing oil and stone driveway and parking area, which is up here by the house. And that will be replaced with a slightly smaller area of pervious gravel driveway. And with respect to the proposed naturally vegetated wetland non-fertilization, non-disturbance buffer, we're actually proposed the exact same buffer that was required as a condition of the prior approval. And again, that project never went forward. Some of that buffer area encompasses areas that are currently natural, and there are some portions, such as this area here, by these cedar trees, that is existing lawn that would be replaced by native plantings. We did not submit a plantings plan for that area with the application because we wanted to get some feedback from the village's consultant. But certainly we understand if that buffer area is approved as part of the project, which we hope we can get the board's approval for, we would submit a plantings plan showing specific list of species and quantities and so forth. I guess with that, I would see if the board has any questions, or Chick, if you have any comments or questions in that regard, particularly with respect to the proposed buffer area.
I can jump in if I may.
I have a question for Chick.
Help me understand how the sewage flow gets to this and how far that is separation.
There's a force main. Yep.
Well, that's the answer. So,
and it's designed by a licensed professional
yeah, I would have loved to have Steve Maresca's office with me here tonight. But yeah, that is the answer. There is a force main that actively pumps the waste from the IA units into the leaching field. And this design has actually been reviewed and, for all intents and purposes, approved by the Health Department, except pending our ability to submit your board's wetlands permit. So in other words, they've gone through the technical review, they've reviewed the system, and at this point, the only outstanding item with the Health Department application is the ability to submit copies of both state and village wetland approvals. In that regard, I should also mention that the New York State DEC, who had also similarly approved the 2008 project, has approved this project in its current form that's before the board tonight.
Is there any grading, fill, or where the leaching is for the system?
There is, you can see there is some regrade that's shown just around the leaching field on the inside of the system. You can see there's a few proposed contours there to adjust the grade around the system, but again, that's well outside the 200-foot.
And there is a retaining wall.
Yeah,
in that area.
Correct.
Explain the height of the retaining wall, or it's... Is that in Maresca's plan?
Yeah, I was going to, did we get you the?
Looks like it's only 2.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
There's a cross-section in the lower left corner of sheet 1.
And that's behind plantings too, correct?
Correct. Yeah, there's a hedge that exists along Halsey.
It also doesn't face the road.
It's facing joining properties, so we're just
Right.
make sure what the specifications are.
We gave you we submitted, yeah, okay, yeah, you have. For some reason, I'm having trouble finding it in my own file, yeah, but you have it.
You want to use it?
Rick, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Have you been able to walk the wetlands on this property?
Yes, I delineated the wetlands on this property.
Okay, and then evidently there's an approval from 2008, and this is going to be like in kind, and that was 2008, this is 2019. Is that plan still adequate from that time frame?
Well, I assume this would supersede any
Yeah.
prior approval. The addition was not constructed, nor was the natural area ever, covenanted or recognized.
Well, they never went forward with it, but they had
Right.
an approved wetland
Yeah, it's
prior.
expired.
But he said that on the new plan, they're going to follow the 2008 plan, is that
Well,
correct?
sort of. I don't misunderstand me. What I meant was there are
Improvements a
certain,
little
yeah,
bit.
Yeah,
there's
so what I'm saying
certain,
was between 2008 and 2019, is that 2008 plan still adequate, in other words, or are there other improvements now that we've looked at that?
Well, I'm reviewing this as it stands. I don't think it's any more aggressive than the 2008 plan. I think there are a number of things that are notable. The removal of the driveway and the reduction of impervious surface to me is a notable improvement. Providing stormwater leaching for the site is a big improvement. IA systems were not approved in 2008, so that's an enormous improvement. We also weren't covenanting the buffer areas at the time in 2008. So I will tell you that I had a conversation with Rob today that was kind of a follow-up to the work session, where I wanted to straighten out the line a little bit and make it easier to describe the covenant, but also to request the landscape planting plan in the areas where the lawn's going to be replaced. And Rob agreed that, you know, that he would speak to his client, and that would most likely be acceptable. So really, you know, I see this as an overall improvement to what was done in 2008.
Can we look at the vegetative buffer? And just, can you kind of show us?
Oh, in terms of just with the map?
Sure, yeah,
Yep,
I just
sure.
want to see the extent of it.
Yeah.
and-
And what I was trying to, do you have a copy of that image? Perfect. So I'll do one first and then the other. It's in here. So this heavily dashed line here is the proposed limit of the buffer. It bends in here to maintain access to the existing dock on Taylor's Creek, and then comes back here. I think probably, I don't know if Chick would remember at this point, and I wasn't involved with it, but there probably was not an extension of the line in this direction because this was a natural area. It's still a natural area. So the image that Chick had forwarded to me, which I really don't see any issue with, is that essentially here, the blue line follows pretty closely, except that it essentially straightens these lines out. So if you were creating meets and bounds on a survey to describe the buffer for purposes of covenant preparation, you would have these straighter lines that follow the same path. But then instead of drifting away here toward the wetland, it adds a substantial area of buffer that would be covenanted in this triangular area. So this picks up, you know, again, part of this existing lawn area, and then the rest of this naturally vegetated area here. There's no proposed clearing here, but obviously having a covenanted non-disturbance buffer there memorializes the fact that this area could never be disturbed or cleared for any purpose. As I mentioned to Chick, you know, we can certainly verify the acceptability of that with the homeowner, but I can say, for all intents and purposes, I don't see any issue with it. I did have a chance to speak with the architect about it this afternoon, and there's no objections to what Chick is proposing in that regard.
So, I mean, so you are proposing an expansion of the.
Correct.
Buffer.
Right.
Yeah, and you saw that I dashed that line. To me, it's optional, but it makes it easier. It's an area that's already vegetated, and they would need a permit to do something in there anyway. But if it's acceptable, and, you know, it certainly adds to the
So they
protection.
wouldn't be able to do anything structurally in there. So, you know, it's not inhibiting.
It would be non-irrigated, non-fertilized, just natural.
Oh, yeah, it would just stay the way it is, really.
And it would remain that way as a permanent condition.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is that that area does flood. I mean, it floods.
It does.
I mean, it floods
Fulton's
right up the
Lane.
road.
Absolutely.
So is that enough of a protection of the bay to have that much vegetative buffer? Is more needed, or is that sufficient?
Well, you know, there's lawn that goes farther toward the water now, so we are expanding the buffer. There's also kind of a practical aspect of access to the dock and some rear yard area. And their proposed improvements are on the landward side of the house, and they're reducing the coverage overall. So again, you have to do the balance, not in the sense of a zoning variance in this case, but the balance just in terms of the wetlands law. But it seems to me as though there's a lot of improvements here. The area of potential flooding is in that Boatman's Lane area. You've seen the tide come all the way up in, you know, into the road. And so that triangular expansion area, the buffer, to me is a very a benefit that addresses your comment.
And that line would run almost up to that existing driveway entrance point.
You know, one thing, Rob, that we noticed was the original 2008 application had the number 67 Boatman's Lane, and we were just curious if the numbering system changed.
That I don't know. Can't answer that.
Yeah, and it was on the DEC permit and the application from 2008. It's more of a curiosity. Obviously, it's number one now.
Yeah. Yeah, now I'm looking at the, yeah, I see what you mean. The old DEC permit even said, yeah, so there must have been a change in the number
It seems like.
at some point. But yeah, I mean, again, basically, the goal here was really relative to the prior approval. As Dan mentioned, we're 10 years farther into future. We're trying to bring to you a project that downscales the development component and upscales the mitigation component. We think it's a good project. And as I said, I think we can, for all intents and purposes, you know, can agree to this modified line. Obviously, we'd have to come up with some meets and bounds for it.
Yeah,
And
that
we-
can be done as a condition of the permit, and then submitted to the village attorney for review and approval.
And we also have, like I said, some areas in there which are existing lawn areas that'll be replaced with native vegetation and become part of that buffer. So obviously, Chick would have to review that and accept it, but we do have a landscape architect that is on the team that was dealing with some of the drainage issues, so we can certainly provide that in short order if, you know, that would be a condition of approval. No problem with that.
Further questions from the board? No. So what do we need?
I think Mr. Herman has to go back and at least rest with his client, the buffer line and everything else, and he should get, I think if he can get information back to us, it'll be up to Chick's review by the work session. And this board might be in a position to do something at the next meeting.
That'd be great. Yeah, I think we could get,
But I think we want to keep the hearing open for all purposes, but if we get the information, you look at it at the work session, you may be able to, assuming there's no other comments from the crowd, you could be in a position to, move on the hearing and take an action.
I think we could get a revised site plan with a planning's plan to check ahead of the work session in June.
So do you want to adjourn for all purposes?
I think keep it open for all purposes, just so that it's flexible for Mr. Herman, and then
Right.
see what he can get in. And,
Can we get a motion
I
to that
move we
effect?
adjourn this application for all purposes.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for hearing us.
Can we get a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn the May meeting of the South Hampton Village Zoning Board of Appeals.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.